Hello and welcome to the Fit Like a Girl podcast. My name is Jackie Lindahl. I am a mom of two, an avid coffee drinker, and a certified personal trainer. I have been in the fitness industry for nearly 10 years, and I help women get fit, strong, and lose weight without losing their damn minds. If you're looking for help on achieving your health, weight loss, and fitness goals without all the fitness industry confusion and BS, you have come to the right place. So welcome back to the Fit Like a Girl podcast. I am very excited because I have a guest on again today, and I have Dean Somerset with me, who is a trainer in Edmonton, but really you're known all over the place. It's not just Edmonton anymore that you are local to. So can you tell people who might not know about you yet, about yourself and what you do in the fitness industry besides just personal training?
I kind of feel like prestige worldwide right now, going outside of the borders of the city. I've been a trainer for 20 years now, and I've also been fortunate enough to write for a whole bunch of publications like Men's Health, Women's Health, Shape, T Nation. I actually have published a book that's coming out at the end of February. I've been able to teach workshops all over the place and continuing education courses for other trainers all over Europe, all over North America and Australia. So yeah, kind of had the opportunity to have a hand in a whole bunch of different ways of being in the fitness industry, which is really cool.
That's crazy. And I mean, I know Edmonton is a major city here in Alberta, but in comparison to worldwide, it's what I would consider a pretty small town, especially like in the fitness industry as far as that goes. So it's kind of crazy coming from Edmonton, being able to do these things all over the world and writing for huge publications like T Nation and Shape and really like these big websites and magazines and everything. But I want to go back to your start in the fitness industry and kind of how this developed to where you are now. So what got you into fitness in the first place and then leading into you starting in the fitness industry as a trainer?
Well, my initial start was I grew up in a small town in BC called Rossland. And if you're a skier or a mountain biker, it's paradise. If you don't play hockey or don't do any of that other stuff, you're kind of left to your own devices. So I wanted to be involved in as many sports as I could. We grew up in a household where all the boys were athletic. I'm the youngest of three and also the smallest of three too, which is kind of funny. But if anyone's ever met me, I'm 6'2", 250 pounds. So when I say I'm the smallest of my family, everyone's like, oh my God, what were your grocery bills like growing up?
I can
And
only
that was,
imagine.
I have no idea how my parents survived, but they did. Yeah, so I was always trying to be athletic growing up. I was a terrible athlete. So my way of trying to get better was getting into the gym to try to get stronger. I wanted to make that into a career. So I got into a degree in kinesiology. And after that, when I was done, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I got a job working at a commercial gym and stayed there for 14 years and just kind of built out what I wanted to do based on, hey, this would be cool. Let's give this a try. Or, hey, this seems like a good idea. This seems like something nobody else is doing. Let's see if I can do something with it. So most of my career has been based on following key interests and then just trying things out to see what happens.
That's interesting. So did you get into kinesiology with the expectation of wanting to go either to medical school or to be a physical therapist?
Yeah, actually, I initially thought that I wanted to go into like sports medicine.
Yeah.
And then when I was done my degree, I worked as a trainer for a couple of years and actually wrote the MCAT exam to see if I could make it in there. I got in the bottom 20% on the physical sciences section, but I got in the top 5% for the writing sample internationally. So I figured, this is the universe kind of telling me that maybe medicine's not the thing, but maybe you need to write a little bit more. So at that point, I
Yeah.
started writing my blog and started putting together more written resources and kind of following that train of things.
That's interesting. So you started writing your blog pretty much right from then on.
Yeah.
And then was it like you started a website, started a blog, and then it just kept blogging your own journey? What did you write about when you first started?
Well, part of it was just trying to figure out what my voice actually was. So when people start something, you have no idea what you're doing. It doesn't matter whether it's a blog, whether it's training yourself in the gym, whether it's running, whether it's a sport. Nobody knows what they're doing on day one. Everyone is a beginner. So for me, it was more about how do I just get reps on this and just see what I can do with it, and using it more as just like a creative outlet, but also something where I could kind of put out some thoughts on training and ways of being a little bit productive. But if I had clients that were asking a lot of questions about stuff, I was able to put it into a blog post. And then when they asked those questions, I could just send them the blog post that I wrote.
Yeah.
So it was more of like delivering information in a way that was easily accessible and easily attainable, written towards what the clients are looking for, but with enough background of technical knowledge and technical wording where people who were coaches or physical therapists or doctors, if they were looking at it, they're like, I get what this person's saying and I understand that they know what they're doing.
Yes, and that's a really fine line to ride between having making your work sound, I don't know if sound is the right word, but making it so that it makes sense for a lay person or a person who isn't in the fitness industry or in the medical field, but also making it correct and using enough definitions from the scientific world that it makes sense for trainers and people in the medical field, but then also not overbearing for a lay person who doesn't understand those
Yeah,
medical terminologies.
huge.
Yeah.
And part of that is just making sure that if you use those terms, you explain what they are.
Yes.
So making sure it's like, okay, I'm going to use this term because this is the correct term, but I want to teach you what that term actually means so that that way when I use it in the future, you'll understand it and you'll have a better knowledge basis behind it. People can learn really easily if you give them the opportunity and if it's subject matter that they're interested in. So I wanted to make it something where it's like if somebody had no interest in training and they read one of my articles, they could walk away understanding what that article was actually about and how they could apply it, if they could apply it specifically to themselves.
Yes.
And if it was somebody who is a clinician or somebody who's a trainer and they're like, you know what, this is a really good article that's going to help me, even better. But most of what I was gearing around was trying to help people who had common problems like, what do I do if my knee hurts when I squat? What do I do if my back hurts when I try and deadlift? What do I do if my shoulder is constantly irritated? You know, being able to do that kind of stuff and still get a training response. Plus, hopefully, getting them to laugh a little bit at the same time, just due to the fact that people pay attention more if they're entertained than if it's just technical jargon.
It's very, very true. And I think that's why people, I mean, not only like yourself, showing off your very dry, sarcastic sense of humor, I find, but then like you think of people like Jordan Site, where a lot of his stuff is very humor based, but it gets the
Yeah.
point across in a way so that people can understand it, but they're also entertained by it.
Yeah. And Jordan's kind of a funny guy. Like at the start of his career, he was trying to be like the very dry, technical, clinical approach where he's wearing like the polo and tie and everything like that, talking about like force vectors. And then he started working with Gary Vaynerchuk and just did a 180. And he's
Hmm.
like, no, I'm going to start doing a children's show. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
doing like stupid humor on the street and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And it's like, yeah, he found his niche really well and he's
Yeah.
leaned into it really hard. So it's really cool to see him develop like that.
It is. I did not follow him when he was very kind of dry and trying to be very science and stuff like that. I started following him when he was really into like every single piece of content had a Harry Potter joke in it of some sort. And I was like, well, this guy's
Yeah.
hilarious. Of course, like I'll follow him as a millennial who watched Harry Potter growing up. Like, yeah, yeah, exactly. So then how did this translate into writing a book? Tell us about the book, and it's coming out right away and what that process is like. So I can imagine writing a book is very different than writing a continual blog and articles for different publications.
Yeah. And I mean, most blog posts are going to be between like 500 to 2,000 words, just due to the fact that most people just don't have interest in reading much longer than that for a post. And people drop off pretty quickly. Like if you have website stats, you can see where people start to fall off on a lot of the blog posts, and it's usually around that point. For the book coming out, we had 100,000 words total that we were looking at getting to, which sounds like a lot, but when you realize it's about 300 pages of writing,
Yeah.
that's about what most books actually are. So it's not
Okay.
really beyond the pale of anything like that. But at the same time, it's a lot of content to put together.
Hmm.
So it's not something where you can just do a quick hit. You have to do a fairly deep dive. Myself and my co-author, Dan Pope, who's a doctor of physical therapy in Boston, we wanted to write a book about like what do common issues and ailments mean? And do you need to stop training? Do you need to go to a physiotherapist or a doctor? Do you need to just suck it up and push through the workout?
Hmm.
What does that mean and how do you actually get into that process? And then how do you design your workout so that you don't have those common issues pop up as much or so that you can just work around them if you need to?
Yeah.
So in getting to that process, obviously we have to be pretty decent writers. So he and I are both written a lot for different publications. He's more focused on CrossFit and he's actually been like a competitive pole vaulter back in the day. So
Oh, no
that's
way.
where his niche is. Yep. And his the clinic that he works at, Mike Reinhold used to be the head athletic therapist, I believe, for the Boston Red Sox. So they work a lot with pro baseball players. So he does a lot of stuff with elite athletes in that regard. So we wanted to write a book for the general population to be able to say, hey, here's how you can still train. Here's how you can do
Yes.
the things you want to do. here's how you can prevent the injuries from happening. And a lot of that came from our existing writing.
Hmm.
So having 10, 15 years of writing a blog and writing different articles and different publications gave me a good body of work where people in the publishing world were able to say, this person is actually reliable when it comes to
Hmm.
putting together content. If I was to just reach out and try to connect with a publisher
Yeah.
as a first-time author with no background or experience, they would look at me and be like, well, come back when somebody else publishes you, or come back when you've self-published your own book, or
Right.
come back when you've done something that means that you're going to see this through.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the publishing world is kind of funny. I'm just going to put this little guy down because he's tooting up a storm in here. But the publishing world's kind of funny because like I've talked with a couple of my friends who are published authors, and they say like, if you're a first time author, forget about it. You have to be a second time author for most notable publishing companies to
Hmm.
actually give you a look. And to do
Right.
that, you usually have to have an agent, you have to do it. So to have the publisher themselves reach out to us and say, hey, we have this idea for you, that was
Yeah.
really cool. And that kind of was the catalyst to begin everything.
That's huge. I mean, yes, you're right, because from my understanding, a lot of first time, especially people in the fitness industry, but really any industry, a lot of first time authors self publish their own books or they self
Yep.
publish their first few books. Like I think even Jonathan Goodman talked about that. That was, I think, his experience in that that's usually how it goes. And then a publisher will eventually reach out based on the success of your own books that you have done yourself.
Mhm.
But that's huge that they reached out to you. Did they reach out to both of you at the same time or reached out to you and then you brought Dan Pope in as well?
So the funny thing is, like the publisher has a group of people who are almost like talent headhunters that they work with. So they're trainers who work in the industry who can see who's going on and who's doing what. We had one of those individuals who I've been friends with for a couple of years. He reached out and he's like, "Hey, would you think about doing this?" And I was like, "Yes." And he walks us through that process. It was me initially, and then we brought Dan in. But Dan is kind of like a linchpin when it comes to doing a lot of the injury rehab type stuff because
Yeah.
that's just his wheelhouse. Um, so they reached out to us, and he helped walk us through the process of putting together a proposal, putting through a table of contents, putting through an outline of what we wanted to do,
Hmm.
doing up all the legal drafting on stuff. So he was essentially like our agent by proxy,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that helped us to understand what that process actually looked like. And
Yes.
it's a fairly detailed process. Like we spent probably about 6 months working on hammering out the details of the table of contents,
Hmm.
which then allowed us to have the outline of what we were going to do for the actual book, which then allowed us to write the book. So the publishers want to make sure that they actually know what's going to go into the book before it's written, so that way they can either green light it or say we want to change this or do that over here, versus well we're going to wait until we see a final manuscript and it's just trash.
Hmm.
Nobody wants that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that they would want the complete detail of everything basically that's going to be in the book because they want to make sure it's actually going to be successful. But I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who've never written a book don't understand the long drawn out process that it actually is to write a book. Like this is a years process, not just a few months of you sitting at a computer smashing on your keyboard writing out a book.
Yeah, and we were initially connected in December 2022. We spent all of, I believe, could be entirely wrong. It might have been 23, but we spent all of 2023 writing the book, and then we did the photo shoot early 2024, and
Hmm.
then all of the post production, all of the layout, all the revisions, all the edits, and now it's getting released in February 2025. So it
Crazy.
was a 2 year plus process. And part of that was that one of the editors we were working with did leave. So we had a new editor start up who was kind of like, and in between, there was about a 6 month delay and everything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like it's not just like a couple of weeks, it's a process of at least 18 months to 2 years.
Wow, that's insane. And so
Mhm.
the book itself, you mentioned it's focused a lot on people being able to, or it's focused a lot on injury specific things and helping people understand what's going on with an injury and what classifies as yes, you need to go to a doctor or get further investigation, or these are things that you can do. That's kind of been your specialty, from my understanding, is working with people post surgery, post rehab for, or during their rehab for injuries and things like that. Is that what kind of sparked this niche for this book?
Absolutely, because I've got a lot of the experience behind it. So what I found was that there was a lot of emphasis put on the rehab side of things, which is exactly what's supposed to happen. When an injury happens, you want to get rehabbed and get back up to a part where you can be cleared to return to play, return to activity, return to whatever you want to do. But then on the other side of things, there's the training world, which typically is we work with healthy people that don't have any joint issues, that don't have any comorbidities or problems. And if you do have any of that, go back to your physio.
Yeah.
So what does the person do if they tore their ACL and they still have some limitations and some issues, but they still want to get back into a training scenario and get active? If the physiotherapist discharges them and says return to activity, the trainer says, I can't work with you because you have a pre-existing issue. What does that do for that person?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where I fit in. I want to make sure that I can work with those people to kind of take them into that training environment, knowing what the limitations are on their injury, but also at the same time knowing how to get the best out of them based on what they have available.
Yes.
So with
Yes.
that 20 years of experience doing that with all sorts of different conditions, clients, people, we were able to come up with a lot of processes and theories and ways of doing things that seem to fit the mold in a lot of scenarios. This isn't going to be a book where it's like, oh, I tore my ACL, I'm going to go pick up this book and that's going to fix me. It's more like, okay, well, my shoulder hurts or my knee hurts. What do I do about it? And how do I prevent that stuff from happening from a programming standpoint so that if I do wind up having some sort of irritation, because let's face it, we're active, we're putting stress on our body, we're going to get injured at some point in time or another. It's just a matter of what do you do about it when it happens? And is it a major thing or is it something that we just have to work around for a couple of weeks to let it get better?
Yes. And this is something that a lot of non-athletes, general population people will come across. I mean, athletes as well, but generally speaking, an athlete who hurts themselves, they understand the work and the effort and changing your program, getting help so that they can get back to return to sport. Like I was definitely in that group when I tore my ACLs and had my injuries and stuff. But a lot of lay people or general population people, your moms in their 40s that just want to be fit and look good, or, you know, a dad, grandma, grandpa that want to feel better, they oftentimes what I've seen is they'll get hurt because shit happens, whether they fall on the ice or otherwise. And then they think, I need to stop. I can't
Yeah.
exercise because my back hurts, my shoulder hurts. So something like this book could be beneficial for them to know when do they need to see a physical therapist or when they need to go to a doctor, but then also what can I do? And how can
Yeah.
you still make progress in some way, shape, or form towards your goals without stopping completely?
True. And there's also like a lot of athletes who know how to train hard, but they also need to kind of get reined in a couple of times too.
I
Like
was
they
that
want to
person.
do, yeah, I'm in that same boat in a lot of ways too. They want to do everything all at once, all at the
Yep.
same time.
Yep.
And right now, if it was yesterday, that would be better than today. But
Yes.
it's one of those things where you can't fight physiology. You can't push a tissue harder than it can recover. So when you try to be like, oh, I'm going to get back to what I was doing pre-injury, but I'm going to do that injured. And I'm going to do that with tissue that's only at like 50% possible strength to it.
Yeah.
It's not going to go well for you. So understanding how to be like, okay, well, here's where I am. How do I take that next step to get up to here? And then the next step up to here, rather than here's where I am and here's where I have to be.
Yes.
You have to have an idea of how do you progress your training beyond just push to failure, push to maximum, push to everything. So we lay out a lot of really good common sense ways of getting people to understand how to progress their programming, how to progress their training volume, how to progress their resistance in a way that they can actually have metric improvements, but actually see progress. And then if things are going sideways, what do you do about that to scale it back in a realistic way?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not trying to say like you're a failure or you're a success if you rehab faster or easier. The goal is to get back to the game. The goal is to get back to doing what you want to do. If that takes you 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks, if we can do it and get you there in one piece, that's the goal.
Yes.
And that's my main goal. Obviously, like if you have competitions coming up or whatnot, you have to compete on game day. But if you're not worried about that and you want to live a happy, healthy life for the next 10, 20, 30 years and not worry about your chronic knee injury, then treat it right when you're going through that rehab process and be aware of what your progression should actually look like.
Yes. And athletes, I think, at least speaking for myself, are notorious for being super fucking impatient and not wanting to rush the process. And I'm guilty. I was guilty of that just as much as anybody else. And then it came back to bite me in the ass more times than I needed it to. But yes, really strategizing and approaching this rehabilitation and return to sport or return to activity, taking your time with it versus rushing it will get you so much farther ahead than rushing it ever did.
100%. And I want to train hard just like everyone else. There's a time and place for that. So let's say that you have a knee injury. You still have 2 good working arms and 1 good working leg, core conditioning, all the other things that we can hit hard, but then we just have to be mindful of the stuff that puts direct stress on that area that's still a bit vulnerable, and then build it up gradually.
Yes, yes. And I think that's where a lot of people get really hung up on, is focusing on what they can't do. Well, I hurt my ankle, like for example, or I hurt my knee. Well, okay, I can't do leg exercises or whatever. Oftentimes they'll just think, well, then I'm fucked. I can't do anything. Versus, well,
Hmm.
yeah, I can still do core stuff. I can do seated, sitting down, upper body stuff. I can have somebody help me get my weights so that you're not grabbing the weights and twisting, putting pressure on those injuries. And
Hmm.
not just for your physical health, but also for your mental health. I feel like through continuing some form of activity that you can do is so important. And it just makes the process better versus focusing on what you can't do and sitting on the couch, essentially.
It's huge. And I've had a lot of conversation with clients when they're like, hey, my shoulder hurts. I can't come in to train today. And I'm like, well, yeah, you can. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I can't do my normal program. My shoulder hurts. It's like, well, you still have two good legs. You still have one good arm. You still have core. You still have
Yes.
conditioning. Your shoulder's good enough for you to text and try and tell me that you can't come in. So obviously it's good enough for some things. Let's figure out what you can do with it. Let's figure out what to avoid, and let's build a plan going forward. Sitting on the sideline is not going to be good enough for what these clients are looking for. And I don't want them to sit on the sideline, barring extreme cases. Like if you got hit
Yes.
in your vehicle while you were driving to work or driving into the gym, yeah, don't come in to train today. If you just had dental surgery, let's maybe take today off so that you don't like bleed out in the middle of the gym, because that would be messy for everyone to clean up. But if you've got just like a sore shoulder, a sore knee, or something like that, let's figure out, let's map what you can do. Let's map what you shouldn't do. Let's figure out where your thresholds and loads could be. And then we can train like animals up to those points and figure out what you would need to do to get you a great training effect and just not sit idly on the sidelines.
Yeah, and I think it also stems from a lot of the old school mentality of if you had an injury, you were supposed to rest it, ice it, elevate, compression, all that. Whereas now, and a lot of people still think that way, but physical therapists I know and doctors are pulling away from that now, saying actually movement is medicine in within
Hmm.
certain parameters and within certain limits. Like, we're not being dumb here, but movement is medicine. And I find people, especially people with back injuries, that's one that of course I come across a lot working with a lot of office workers and stuff, is, oh, I pulled my lower back, I got a back thing, is sitting and doing nothing makes it worse versus
Hmm.
better.
Yeah. And the funny thing with injuries is that when your body has anything go wrong, your body's natural instinct is to protect it. So the muscles around the area will spasm up, or they'll just shut off entirely. There'll be swelling in the area. Fluid moving in and out of it is going to be compromised and impaired and done differently. So the way that we can manage that and get things back online effectively is gentle movement to restore the neurovascular system into it, retrain the muscle to actually turn on and turn off versus just holding consistently tight the entire time, and also decreasing the threshold of pain sensitivity. So if somebody's locked right up, get them to move around a little bit, get them to pump some fluid through it. That makes it hurt less just due to the fact that you're moving it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Even with like DOMS, like delayed onset muscle soreness from a workout, benefits from walking or light cart, just movement in general to get that
Hmm.
blood flowing and get those muscles loosened up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a time and place for everything. But for most people, if they haven't had like a serious injury where a lot of the red flags and warning bells are going off, they could benefit just from gentle, easy movement. And a lot of our goal as trainers is to figure out what that looks like for them and how do they actually access it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, how has your coaching style changed and developed over the years? And have you always worked with people post surgery, post injury, or was that kind of a niche that you fell into over time?
Part of it was when I started working in a commercial gym, I was working with everybody, which was whoever walked through the door.
Hmm.
Being in a downtown facility, it was a lot of office workers and a lot of people that were recreationally active. So it wasn't a lot of athletes. It was people who worked 40 hours a week in an accounting firm or a law firm and then wanted to go play squash at 5 o'clock at full gas and wondered why they tore their Achilles or wondered why their shoulder was sore or wondered why this. So part of it was saying, well, here's the business that's in front of me right now.
Hmm.
What do I do with that?
Yeah.
And that was what a lot of it was people with aches, pains, injuries, and stuff that they've accumulated through 30 or 50 years of being physically active. So then I had to figure out what to do with that.
Hmm.
Because if you don't figure out what to do with those scenarios, you pretty much lose that business. They're not going to want to renew with you, and they're going to find somebody else who can either do what you or do what they need to do or do it better than you can. That's
Yeah.
just the nature of the business. So I started reaching out to a lot of their doctors, physical therapists, chiropractors, massage therapists, and through just basic freedom of information protection access, I was able to get them to provide information to me to help me do my job better, but then also formed relationships with them to be able to go shadow them, see what they were doing, get them to come into the gym, see what I was doing, create kind of a reciprocal effect where they were referring people to me, I was referring people to them within the ability that they had to be able to do so. And we were able to actually develop that network really easily throughout the company, and something that kind of led to a bit of a niche that we were able to expand on.
That's really cool. And I mean, that's an important note for any personal trainer or somebody who works in a health and medical field to know, is that it's about collaboration. And being a personal trainer for myself, very often I will reach out to physical therapists and who are working with my client for like, hey, let's collaborate on coming up with a program so that it benefits your client. Your client will trust you more, and then
Hmm.
you're just going to help your client have a better experience and be able to improve their injury or ailment, whatever it is that they're dealing with. So having those relationships is huge. And then, yes, of course, the benefits of cross referrals and things like that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I've never had a situation where I've looked worse by telling a client, I want you to go see this person who's going to help you in a way that I can't.
Yes.
It's only ever made me look better by saying, I can't do everything, but I know someone who can do the stuff that I can't do
Mhm.
better than I can. And then you can come back to me with better results, and we can get more out of the training program that you're looking for.
So you're saying not just blasting a bunch of bullshit out on the internet and actually referring things to experts is helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen the funny thing is when you're in fitness industry for long enough, you learn a lot of really terrible things about a lot of really terrible people.
No
I've seen
shit.
people pass themselves off almost as like medical doctors who barely graduated high school. And I've seen people say, well, I'm just like a physiotherapist. I'm like, no, you're not.
No, you're
I've
not.
seen people who haven't taken a single course do manipulations on their clients on the gym floor. And I was like, yeah, let's get away from that entirely. Because if anything
Jesus.
goes wrong and the lawyer says, are you certified to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And the trainer says, no, I'm not. Well, guess what? You lost this lawsuit, so we're going to take your house now.
Yes, and I think that's something that a big misconception about personal training is we have a very specific scope of practice that we are supposed to be within. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of people in the industry that go way outside that scope of practice, way outside
Yeah,
of it. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I've taken advanced post-degree certifications, and they all still say refer back to physiotherapy, refer back to medical doctors, refer back to this. Like, I
Hmm.
can do a lot of things that the average trainer can't do because of the degrees and certs that I have.
Totally.
Great, but it doesn't mean that I'm even close to on the same page as a lot of the medical professionals out there because they have things like legal insurance and legal requirements part of their job. I
Yes.
don't, because as a trainer, we are kind of still the Wild West.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is, in all honesty, it is because anybody can take a weekend cert and become certified or an online certification, and the point of entry to this profession is low in comparison
Hmm.
to especially the medical field or physical therapists. Yeah, even
Yep.
chiropractors have a longer certification than us, quite a bit
Yeah.
longer.
A Caro needs to go through 4 years of school at least in
Yeah.
order to be able to get their degree. So they've got way more education than a lot of trainers out there would.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing that I find is also very different about you in comparison to a lot of trainers that are in your position is you're still working on the gym floor in the gym quite regularly. And whereas a lot of people in the industry have transitioned to completely online or they can't wait to get away from the gym floor. Tell me about that and what your why you chose to stay on the gym floor, even with your business growing as big as it has, let's be honest.
So part of it is I actually like training people. That's kind of the big one. I know a lot of trainers out there who seem to have fallen into the industry because they wanted to just learn more stuff about how to train themselves, and training people was always seen as like an unpleasant or obstacle type thing or hard. I just like training people, and I've been successful enough in online training where if I wanted to, I could lean into that, but then I'd be stuck in my laptop all day and I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't get to interact with people. And I always jokingly talk to my clients, it's like I only work with cool people. I'll only work with people who I want to be friends with.
Yeah.
And I get to hang out with friends all day long, which is awesome.
Yeah.
because that just means that that social niche is filled.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, I could find success in a lot of different venues, but at the same time, being on the gym floor, it gives me energy. It gives me a reason to go. It gives me the learning tools that I need for all the other stuff I'm doing.
Yeah.
If I'm watching 10 or 15 people a day train and see what the results are from those training programs, that guides what I do outside of the gym. That guides the online programming I put together, the writing I do, all of that kind of stuff. Without that
Yeah.
direct intervention of the people in front of me, I don't get a chance to have that information.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also that you gain a much different relationship with a one-on-one client versus online. Like, don't get me wrong, I love my online clients, and I feel like I gain quite close relationships with them just with the way
Mhm.
that I coach. But there's that online where you're seeing them for a certain amount of hours, even a couple hours, depending on the client, a week. You're hearing about their day and everything like that. Like, it is different.
Yeah. And with a lot of online versus in person, I always say that in person coaching, whether it's one on one or small group or semi private or anything like that, it's always proactive coaching. You're
Yes.
telling people what to do to see change right now. So between reps 2 and 3, I can tell you do this differently. And then the rest of that set is improved.
Hmm.
With online coaching, it's typically reactive coaching. Somebody's finished the workout, they send you a video of what they did, and you say, okay, next time do this differently.
Yeah.
Or you're doing this, I need you to fix this over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you're doing like a virtual session, and then it's no different than in-person coaching, but just through a Zoom screen. But
Yeah.
it can be hard to do that as well. Like we found out during the pandemic for everyone who was doing Zoom, it's
Yeah.
so different to look at that because then the person has to set the camera up in the right place. You have to talk to them differently to get them to cue differently. Online coaching, you have to communicate entirely differently than you would in person because you can't show people what to do as easily.
Hmm.
You can't touch a muscle and be like, I need you to flex this more. Yes,
Yeah.
now you're doing that, do it like that.
Yeah.
So your communication skill has to be entirely different. The coaching is reactive versus proactive. The
Hmm.
way that the person communicates back to you is sometimes not what you would need. It's not as much as you would want. Like I've had some clients where it's like, thanks for the program. And then I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. 4 weeks goes by. Hey, how's the program going? Good. Okay, that's all you got from me? Can you give me a little more information? Like,
Yeah.
are any exercises hurting? Or how's the progress with your knee going? Are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Like, did you miss any of the workouts? Nope.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we got to. Whereas if somebody walks into the gym in person, I can get so much information just by seeing them when they walk into the gym. Are their eyes heavy? Are they walking with a limp? Are they bouncing all over the place? They look like they have ADHD and they're just like squirrel everywhere. Or is it something where like all that is information that I can use to determine what we're going to do for the workout going forward? I don't get any of that online.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
either have to really map out what my communication has to be or be willing to accept it's not going to be as good as it could be in person.
Yeah. And I mean, there's pros and cons to both. Like, there are pros and cons to both in that in person, you get that so much more one on one. Like you said, it's proactive. Online has that nice flexibility for people who don't have that ability. It's generally financially easier for people. So there is that barrier
Hmm.
as well. So there's pros and cons to both. It really just depends on the individual and the coach as to what's best for them.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have kids and you can't spend 12 hours a day at a gym, online is a great option.
Yeah.
If you want to travel or if you want to be in different locations or if you want your business to be portable with you, like if you're in the armed forces and you want to go place to place to place and you want your business to come with you, great. Online is a
Mhm.
fantastic tool. If you want to do a hybrid model where you do in person and online, fantastic. It works as a great option for that.
Yeah.
But for me personally, it just doesn't seem like something I want to lean into harder.
Yeah.
I prefer the online versus, or sorry, I prefer in person versus online.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. Um, so with everything that you've been doing between like online training and writing and speaking at events, writing a freaking book, and then in-person training all on top of this, have you had to change how you train in person? Have you had to change the amount of hours that you're in the gym to accommodate for all the other shit that you're doing in your career at this moment?
So I'm the kind of person who, if I'm bored, that's a problem for me. So I'll always find things to do.
Yeah.
And like most weeks, it's between 45 to 50 sessions a week in the gym, and then everything else on top of that. So I have done a little bit more semi-private training. I've increased my rates for one-on-one training. So that's helped out to kind of make that more of a priority that way.
Hmm.
But then everything else just kind of finds a way into the gaps.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing 10 hours a week of online coaching or writing or something like that, that's reasonable on top of the other 40 or 50 hours a week of training clients in person.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it does. It is that give and take where you have to adjust in other areas so that you can do all these other endeavors that you've always wanted to do.
hmm
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm in a position where I don't have kids. I've got dogs. I've got a wife who's always been very supportive and knows that when I'm busy, I'm happy. And at the
Yeah.
same time, like she has her own things going on, so that makes it a little bit easier for her as well.
Yeah.
But we also like to be able to travel if we want to. We like to have a house that we're paying down. We also like to be able to have our separate time to do our own things. So
Yeah.
uh, just being able to be busy is where I'm happy.
Yeah, that's fair. I am very much the same. I like to be busy, whether it is doing actual work or just finding random fucking hobbies to do because I can't sit still.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
at this point, 20 some years into your career, you've worked with thousands of people throughout, whether it's in person, whether it's online, whether it's coaches. When it comes to people having success in their fitness journey or towards their fitness goals, whatever those goals might be, what do you feel like are some of the crucial keys to success that people need to know that you've experienced throughout your years as a trainer?
So my most successful clients usually have a lot of the same traits. And they might not necessarily be pro athletes, but these are people who, if they're showing up to the gym and doing stuff, they've actually got a lot of the same concepts. So the first one is they're willing to show up consistently. They're not making excuses as far as why they can't come into the gym. They're not saying, well, this became a greater priority of that. They show up. And it might be an issue to show up. They might show up a couple minutes late. They might have to leave a few minutes early, but they are every week regularly in the gym the same number of times. And that's just something that is part of who they are.
Yeah.
After that, there are people that are willing to communicate. They're willing to say, hey, my shoulder is a bit sore today. I tried doing this the other day and I'm a little bit off, or man, I did this other workout the other day and it went really well. Why did that happen? So they want to know more about the process and they're willing to tell me what's going on, not in a way of like, I'm criticizing your program, but it's more like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. What do we do about this? Or this
Yeah.
is what's going on. These are the results I'm getting. What can we do to make this a little bit different? They view it as more of a joint effort. It's me and them together working to help them get better
Mm-hmm.
rather than it's just me or them.
Yeah.
They're also able to adapt really easily to life. So to stay in the gym or keep coming back into the gym, work throws people for a loop. Family throws people for a loop, vacations, all that kind of stuff. They can roll with environmental changes, they can roll with life and schedule changes and still find a way to get what they want out of it rather than it being this changed and now I can't deal with it. So they
Yes.
find a way to get back into the groove. If it was something where they got sick for 2 weeks, it's not the end of the world. They're like, okay, I'll get back into the game when I'm healthy, when I'm feeling better, and I will be able to do this. In the meantime, I'm just going to rest up and get some gentle movement in, stay hydrated. Maybe it's something where they moved or the relationship broke up, but at the same time, they can adapt to those different things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
After that, there are people who do focus on their goals. It's not something where the goal is a nebulous concept that they'll never be able to hit. It's something where it's like, okay, here's what I'm working towards. I can see the program leading towards that. I'm going to keep working on the program
Yeah.
rather than it being something like, I just want to feel healthy. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great goal. I don't know what that means.
Yes.
I've been working in health and fitness for 20 years, and I don't know what you mean when you say, I want to feel healthy. Whereas if somebody's like, I want my blood pressure to come down, I want my resting heart rate to come down, I want to lose 20 pounds, I want to get stronger, I want to do this, 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 so that I can do these other things. Great. That's information that we can use. Those are
Mm-hmm.
quantitative measurements to lead towards that qualitative measurement of, I want to feel healthy.
Yes.
So on
Yeah.
top of that, they also find joy in the process. They enjoy working out one way or another. For some people, that will never happen. They just
Yeah.
never enjoy the process of working out, but they can find joy in that process.
Mm-hmm.
They might be like, oh, I hate the feeling of this. I had one client who did not want to sweat because she thought sweating was gross. And I was like, so I can't help you with that. You're going to have to figure out how to either avoid thinking about sweating or deal with sweat or something like that. So,
Turn on the
I
air
mean, I can make
conditioning every time you work out. Like, what are we gonna do here?
yeah, and it's minus 10, it's minus 30 this weekend, so just go outside for a few minutes and you'll be fine. So we might have to make it something where they don't think about workout as a workout, like a slog. We might play games, we might crack jokes, we might make it a little bit competitive. I might create inside jokes or anything like that to make it something where when they show up to the gym, it's less about the workout and more about the experience than the actual act of training.
Yeah.
because for them, that's not the starting point, but we can find joy in the process as much as we can. We might also just focus on basics. It's like, okay, well, I've got some of my clients that have been training for 15 years doing the same exercises
Yeah.
as 15 years ago. We've done variations, we've done different exercises, but a squat is a squat is a squat. It's never
Yes.
really going to change. It's not going to be
Yes.
something that's different. So
Yeah, I
for a
can't
lot of
remember.
people, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I can't remember who said the quote of like effective training is just repeating the same 12 exercises over and over until you die.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, if you look at like a power lifter, they're going to do a squat, a bench, a deadlift. And that's pretty much all they're going to do until they give up or retire. And they're going to
Yes.
do accessory lifts, they're going to do accessory actions. If you look at an Olympic lifter, a snatch and a clean and jerk. That's it. They'll do variations, accessories, all that kind of stuff. Most bodybuilder programs are going to be things like upper body, lower body. They might target different muscle groups, but that's it. A basic split is a push-pull legs. And you're going to do a lot of similar exercises all the time. That doesn't mean that it's problematic. It doesn't mean that you need to switch it up. It just means you need to find joy in the boredom.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I mean the common denominator I think with all those points that you've pointed out is consistency. And
Hmm.
letting that just be the ultimate goal at the end of the day is staying consistent with whatever you're doing. And I know that's where a lot of people really do struggle with, or they only see the end goal as that's what I have to get to. That's what I have to get to. Forgetting that it's the journey. If you're doing it right, this
Yeah.
journey is actually not going to end. You may change the way that you do things. Your goals will probably change over time, but there is no ultimate end goal. Yay, I'm finished until you're dead, in theory.
Yeah. And I talk with my clients all the time. It's like, yeah, you want to set this goal for this time frame coming up here, but then what? When you're done
Hmm.
that goal, are you dead? Are you just statically stuck in limbo in life? Like you're going to change going forward. Is it going to be something where it's like, okay, I need to maintain my physical activity. I need to change my goal set. I need to change my interests. I need to find a way to keep going. Like what is next for you? Once you hit this goal, it's not that life stops. It's that now you live going forward with this new goal attainment.
Yes, yes. And that sticking with consistency versus being perfect, which I know is a big struggle. And a lot of people have this all or nothing mentality when it comes to fitness. I'm either on or off. There's no in between. I don't know how many times I've heard that. And I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 more times than I have in your career. How do you help
Mhm.
people change that mentality?
A big part of it is like when people are all or nothing, they forget to see like the small wins that pop up that add up to the big wins. So there's the saying you can't see the forest for the trees. Well, you still have to see the individual trees and know that they're there. So at the same time, I've got a lot of clients who, if they have big, audacious goals and that's all they're shooting for, or maybe there are people who consistently denigrate themselves and talk down to themselves or say it's not good enough because of this or that. I help them to try to find the goals. It's like, this is better than it was 2 weeks ago. Do you see that? This is better than it was a month ago. Do you see that? I want you to say this. I want you to be aware that this is happening. I want you to acknowledge that this is something that's good and you're making progress. A lot of my clients do what I consider to be like the compliment sandwich of terribleness. So they'll say,
Hmm.
I'm not good enough, but I did this really well, but I could still really be better over here. So they do, instead of being like good, they do bad, good, bad. So
Hmm.
it's like, okay, you can actually celebrate a win without it seeming conceited, arrogant, cocky, anything like that, and just be able to say, okay, that was good. That was cool. I did something really good here. And it doesn't have to be measured against somebody else. It doesn't have to be measured against yourself, against your own level of expertise or perfection that you want to achieve. It just has to acknowledge that this has actually improved.
Hmm.
That by itself is a win. That's a great thing to be able to get to. That's a great place for a lot of people to understand. It's like, yeah, we don't have to categorize good things with bad things.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think you're right. Like a lot of people will have that shit sandwich essentially where they'll try to say something good about themselves, but then it's followed by all this other negative stuff instead of just focusing
Hmm.
on a win is a win. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be that it's easier to sit on the toilet than it was 5 months ago. Great. A win is a win. Like that's good.
Yeah. It's almost like people have a competition with themselves to list out all the bad things. And if they don't do that properly, then they fail even more or something like that. It's like, yeah, you know what? Guess what? You walked into the gym today and you ran on the treadmill at 6 miles an hour for 10 minutes and you couldn't run 6 months ago.
Hmm.
That's a win. It doesn't matter that somebody else on the treadmill next to you is running at 7 miles an hour. It doesn't matter that the person who won the world marathon time is holding 13 miles an hour, you did better today than you did last time. That's great. That's the point of being here.
Yeah. Yeah. The only competition here is just you trying to do better than you were yesterday or where you were when you first started. That's the only competition that needs to exist versus anybody else that you feel like you're in competition with, which you're not.
Yep. And then just acknowledging that you did well and not having it come back to say like, well, it's not good enough here or good enough there or something here, or I shouldn't be doing this, or, oh, look at how vain I am by thinking about this. It's like, no, that's great. Do this. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And what advice would you have for somebody who is in the thinking stage about starting their journey, but they haven't quite committed yet to, okay, I'm going to contact a coach. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. What advice would you have to help kind of get them to the point where they're ready to start and that they're going to be off on their way?
Sometimes you can think about it and think about it and think about it and nothing happens. Sometimes you just have to do it. Sometimes you just have to pull the trigger, send the email, walk into the door, grab your shoes, put them into a bag, get into the gym, and just do a workout. It doesn't have to be something where you think about it or become ready for it, because if you wait to be ready, you'll never be ready. Sometimes you just have to do it to make it happen. A lot of the best things in life happen when you're least expecting them. A lot of the best relationships form when you don't expect them to actually form. A lot of the best results come from times where you weren't ready for them or thinking they were even possible to happen. So the only way you can actually have something happen that's beneficial is to take action. If you're waiting for that time, the time is now. You're getting permission from me. You're getting permission from Jackie right now. You have to go and do that at this moment.
Yeah. And that imperfect action is better than no action at all. 10 minutes is always better than zero.
Yeah. And like I said at the start of this podcast, everyone sucks when they start. So be willing to suck, be willing to be terrible at whatever it is you do, and be willing to make improvement by showing up consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize it's a skill. Like, practicing discipline or even just practicing a fucking squat. It's a skill, just like any other skill that anybody else has learned in their life. The more you practice it, the better that it gets. It's not going to be amazing right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. I'm still learning how to squat 30 years later.
Same.
Yeah. And every rep is a new opportunity.
Yeah.
And every rep is a new opportunity to learn, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So kind of getting into the closing here, you have your book coming out end of February, you said. Is there a specific date that it's coming out?
Yeah, the book's called Rock Solid Resilience. It's out February 28th. Anywhere do you get books, whether that's at Chapters, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, Amazon, local corner bookstore, any of those places. You'll be able to pre-order it now if you want, but it's available for release on the 28th.
Awesome. And then what do you have coming this year for other business ventures, seminars, talks? Are you traveling to different seminars all over the place again this year? What's your plans?
Travel's a bit light right now just because travel has become so expensive in the last little while, but I am planning to go to Toronto for the CanFit Pro conference, probably the Evolve conference in Edmonton because it's nice and local.
Yep.
Outside of that, I have a independent trainer mentorship program that's going to run through probably the third cycle this spring or summer. And outside of that, just try and work with as many cool, awesome people in the gym as I can.
Nice. And where can the cool, awesome people find you?
My Instagram is dsomerset1. My website is deansomerset.com. I have an email newsletter you can sign up for there. If you want to go on YouTube, search out Dean Somerset and you'll be able to find me there. Other than that, yeah, I'm just kind of all over the place.
Nice. And you'll get to see, if you follow him on Instagram, all the pictures of your super cute dogs.
Yeah. For everyone who's videoing right now, you get to see the little squish face right now.
Yes, this will be on YouTube so people can see that. Well, thanks so much, Dean. I'll make sure to post your website and everything in the show notes. And yeah, I'm excited to read your book when it comes out later this month.
Absolutely. Can't wait to hear what you think of it.